If Kamala Harris does not win this upcoming election, she will have no one but herself to blame. Donald Trump has not run a perfect campaign by any stretch of the imagination. But Kamala Harris, as a candidate, is as weak as I've seen in my lifetime for a major party, and is running just a horrific campaign at every turn. So we are now about a week into those of us who are not voting for Kamala Harris being called fascists and Nazis, right? It's been about 7 days of half the country being called fascists and Nazis by the Democratic nominee. Well, suddenly they have come to the obvious conclusion that this is a bad idea. Whoa! Who would have seen that coming? You mean the campaign that was all about joy up until they started trailing in the polls is now realizing that calling the country fascists and Nazis because they're not voting for them isn't a great play? Wow. Didn't see that coming, said nobody ever. Well, yesterday, the New York Times reported that Kamala Harris has been warned against calling Donald Trump a fascist because it's not cutting through with voters. Future Forward, the leading pro-Kamala Harris super PAC, said in an email circulated to Democrats that its internal testing showed attacks on Donald Trump's character were not that persuasive. Future Forward said in the same email that Harris's campaign claim that her opponent was exhausted was also falling flat with voters. Oh, you mean they don't believe that the guy who's doing multiple rallies a day, it seems like, is exhausted? The guy who's done more media than his opponent is supposedly exhausted? The guy who did 3 hours with Joe Rogan is exhausted? Yeah, that was always nonsense. That was always silly. But we are in the silly season of the political climate. Instead, this email, internal email to Democrats that the New York Times got a hold of, urged Democrats to focus on the vice president's proposals on the economy and abortion rights, and to set up a contrast with Donald Trump. The email said, quote, purely negative attacks on Donald Trump's character are less effective than contrast messages that include positive details about Kamala Harris's plans to address the needs of everyday Americans. I was sitting here 7 weeks ago thinking that Donald Trump was going to lose. Donald Trump was the far more negative candidate. Kamala Harris was playing up that joy thing pretty well. She was fresh off a win in a debate between Donald Trump. And I thought, okay, she's got some momentum. She's got some mojo. Her campaign is effectively hiding her as well. And she right now is the front runner. And the last 7 weeks, it's totally unraveled. And the last week has been the worst of all, where they've outwardly called their opponent and his supporters, as a result, Nazis. Suddenly, Donald Trump, who is not the figure of joy and optimism, Trump prefers dark campaigning. If I had one critique of Trump, is I wish he'd bring some more joy, some more optimism. Now, he does do it, but always the darkness exceeds the light when you listen to a Donald Trump rally. That's how it goes, John.
I think that's what the Arnie Palmer thing was. A little bit of trying to bring some joy.
Listen. Give me more Arnie Palmer 9-iron jokes.
Okay.
Sign me up for that.
There you go.
Because Trump is very funny. But when he gets there and he does his whole shtick, it is darker than it is lighter most of the time. So if that means more Arnold Palmer jokes, sign me up for that. But Kamala had the joy thing down pat, or at least more so than Trump, and that was helping her. And then, as she kept struggling and struggling and struggling in the polls, what you saw was a darker approach. And if you're going to go dark, if you're Kamala Harris, then suddenly people aren't feeling good about you. They may not feel great about Trump, but they don't feel good about you when you're calling half the country Nazis. It just doesn't work. So you can hear it yesterday in Kamala Harris's voice. She spent some time in Michigan and said this.
And I will refer to what you all are doing here to tell you that you are a source of my optimism and also my ambition about what we are capable of.
Now, it's all empty promises. It's all just words. But to be fair, people want to hear that. People want to feel good. Now, it's been a long few years in this country. You go back to COVID, you come out of COVID, you've got record inflation, the world's on fire. Social media continues to divide us more and more every day. People want some optimism, they want some joy, they want some laughs, even if it's coming from somebody who can't fix their problems, right? And Kamala Harris can't fix the problems that need to be fixed in this country, but it doesn't matter for millions of voters. They just want to feel better. So she's going to revert back to this strategy with 1 week to go until the election. But I happen to believe it's too little too late. It's the right play, but it's a play that she should have been doing for 7 weeks. Instead, as the campaign lost focus, as her campaign lost steam, as Donald Trump started picking up steam, they went negative and negative and more negative. To the point now where Donald Trump is the guy on stage dancing the Macho Man and the YMCA and looks like he's having the time of his life and looks like he's the candidate of joy and optimism. So they're going to revert back to this for the next 7 days. The question is, will it be enough and will it work? And I don't see how it can. You've got millions of voters, tens of millions of voters who've already cast their ballot. Yes, there's more to come this week, but I don't see how it's feasible. And in the meantime, what you have is a candidate who really doesn't have a message and continues to be Michael Scott in real life. Did you see this last night?
No, I'm not sure exactly, but I did think of something when you were speaking of that release earlier about along these lines, but go ahead, yeah.
Let me play this last night from Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Good.
Kamala Harris doing her best Michael Scott impression, and it is an all-timer.
Okay, now I want each of you to shout your own name. Do that. Because it's about all of us. It's about all of us. And listen, I have fought my whole career to put the
she's having a good moment. She's got an entire audience chanting her name. It looks good on TV. And then she stops him and goes, chant your own name.
Mark,
Pete. I mean, this is ridiculous. The audience is like, what are you talking about? No, we chant your name. You're the politician. I almost get what she was going for there, but it doesn't work. It doesn't make an ounce of sense, and it is the dumbest thing you could possibly say when thousands of people are chanting your name 8 days out from an election last night in Michigan, and you stop them and you say, now chant your own name because it's about all of us. That is right out of The Office, John.
I was just thinking that maybe the walls affected her, but I'm not sure about really what she was starting with. eHarmony probably would have matched them up on dating sites, seemingly, for this.
Yes. They are meant for each other.
Apparently.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. 913-408-7957 as we kick it off on a Tuesday morning on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM. We are streaming all morning long as you get your morning started on the Alexa and the Google Home as well. So an op-ed was written yesterday that may go down as one of the most important pieces written in any newspaper in the 21st century. Who wrote it? What was it? We'll share that next on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM. In the meantime, can I get one more chant from everybody here? Pete.
Mark.
You're listening to KCMO. This may go down as one of the more important pieces that's come out of any newspaper in the 21st century. Now, I know that might sound like a tallest midget kind of an argument because the newspaper industry is struggling mightily and does not have the juice that it used to have. But I have to give credit where it's due to the Washington Post and the guy who owns the Washington Post, and that is Jeff Bezos. So Jeff Bezos apparently helped make the decision last week to not endorse in the presidential election. Now, the Washington Post has endorsed Democrats for the last 50 years in presidential politics. So it's not like anybody was waiting with bated breath to say, oh, man, I wonder who the Washington Post is going to endorse here, John.
That feels familiar, doesn't it?
Yeah, we've seen this script before. Everybody knew what they were going to do if they ended up doing it. And Jeff Bezos pulled the plug and said, nah, we're not doing that anymore. Sorry. And he got crushed from so many on the left. Oh, my goodness, how could you not endorse? Oh,
how dare you?
There's a fascist on the ballot, and Jeff Bezos won't do his American duty. Jeff Bezos doesn't care. And Jeff Bezos wrote an opinion piece in the Washington Post yesterday, headlined, "The Hard Truth. Americans don't trust the news media. A note from our owner." This is what we call based Jeff Bezos. That's who this Jeff Bezos is. And I won't read you the whole thing, but I will share excerpts from it because I think it's an incredibly important piece. And it's amazing how the big tech oligarchs have shifted over the last 4 years. 4 years ago, nobody was looking at the presidential race and saying, you know what, we've got to have a little more respect for both sides here. There was nobody on Donald Trump's side. You had Mark Zuckerberg all in for Joe Biden, Zuckerbucks helping, local municipalities get as many mail-in ballots as they can get their hands on the whole thing. 4 years later, Elon Musk has a PAC helping Donald Trump. Mark Zuckerberg is nowhere to be found. He's staying out of it. He has said as much. He's like, I'm not getting involved. And now Jeff Bezos, the owner of Amazon and the Washington Post, puts out this piece saying the media is broken. And he starts off here, in the annual public surveys about trust and reputation, journalists and the media have regularly fallen near the very bottom, often just above Congress. But in this year's Gallup poll, we have managed to fall below Congress. Our profession is now the least trusted of all. Something we are doing is clearly not working. Let me give an analogy, writes Bezos. Voting machines must meet two requirements. They must count the vote accurately, and people must believe they count the vote accurately. The second requirement is distinct from and just as important as the first. Likewise with newspapers. We must be accurate. We must be believed to be accurate. It's a bitter pill to swallow, but we are failing on the second requirement. He's spot on there, by the way. This is what the media has done to itself. Even when they report accurate things about Donald Trump or Republicans, there are many Republicans who say, I'm not going to believe it because it's coming from you guys, and you guys don't tell the truth too many times. Now, I've tried my best on this show to balance that because there are times when the New York Times or the Washington Post report things about candidates or politicians I prefer, and they're accurate. But because they've destroyed their own credibility, people don't want to believe them, and they have an easy out because of how the industry has tarnished its own reputation, especially over the last decade or so. He adds here, most people believe the media is biased. Anyone who doesn't see this is paying scant attention to reality, and those who fight reality lose. Reality is an undefeated champion. It would be easy to blame others for our long and continuing fall in credibility, but a victim mentality, writes Bezos, will not help. Complaining is not a strategy. We must work harder to control what we can control to increase our credibility. Then he adds this killer line here. Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post, wrote this opinion piece yesterday. Presidential endorsements do nothing to tip the scales of an election. Thank you. They do nothing to tip the scales. No undecided voters in Pennsylvania are going to say, I'm going with newspaper A's endorsement. None, writes Bezos.
Yep, there you go. It's the people that want symbolism over substance that are upset.
Exactly right. They're hardcore base who didn't actually have any interest in waiting for the endorsement. They're all Kamala Harris voters. They're the ones who are most outraged by this. Bezos says what presidential endorsements actually do is create a perception of bias, a perception of non-independence. Ending them is a principled decision, and it's the right one. Eugene Meyer, publisher of the Washington Post from 1933 to 1946, thought the same thing, and he was right. By itself, declining to endorse presidential candidates is not enough to move us very far up the trust scale, but it's a meaningful step in the right direction. I wish we had made the change earlier than we did, in a moment further from the election and the emotions around it. That was inadequate planning and not some intentional strategy. See, this is Jeff Bezos thinking like a business person. This is the difference between Jeff Bezos, who has created, developed, and run one of the largest businesses in American history, and journalists who don't live in the real world, who just want to do everything based on their feelings. What Bezos is laying out here is a very smart and articulate argument for trying to turn around a sinking ship when it comes to trust in media and trust in journalism. Frankly, I wish he would buy the Kansas City Star after reading this piece. Lord knows we need something like that here in Kansas City. In the meantime, I'll keep trying to be a voice of reason for you and get you real news around this town, but we're only a three-man operation here. But Bezos, from the larger perspective, is spot on. The media needs to get itself more credibility, and the way you can start doing it, one small way you can start doing it, is by dropping presidential endorsements. Now, it doesn't mean their journalism is going to be better necessarily, but at least it gets away from the perception of all we do is have editorial boards who all lean left, who always endorse Democrats. Now, apparently, the Washington Post has lost 200,000 subscribers, which tells you all you need to know. People simply wanted the Kamala Harris endorsement from the Washington Post because of their feels, because of the vibes. That's it. Not because it was going to turn anybody's opinion one way or the other. It's all about emotion. And Jeff Bezos, because, he is a great businessman, looks at the business model, which has continued to lose money for him, and says, how do we turn this thing around? Now, he's got a lot of work to do when it comes to what's happening inside his newsroom, but at least this is a step in the right direction. 913-408-7957 at 628 on a Tuesday morning on KCMO Talk Radio. Don't forget, it's Tirade Tuesday. 2 hours away. Start warming up and getting those tirades all set for a fun segment. We do it each and every Tuesday morning. It is your rant of the morning every Tuesday, 8:35 here on KCMO Talk Radio, 95.7 FM, and streaming on the KCMO Talk Radio app. The pitch to men, if you are a dude out there, the pitch to you is really getting to the point of insulting. I have more evidence next. 6:34 on a Tuesday morning here on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM. We're always streaming for you all morning long on the KCMO Talk Radio app, on your Alexa, and, of course, on your Google Home. So the pitch to men, the gender gap is real. It will be the story of this election. It won't be young versus old. It won't be white versus black, white versus Latino. It will be men versus women. That will be the story coming out of this election, no matter what ends up happening next Tuesday. The question is, what is each side doing to try to close their respective gender gaps? I don't think Trump's doing a great job by any stretch in trying to sway women voters, but on the other side, Kamala Harris is doing an awful job trying to persuade male voters. She's doing things like going on, or she's having, I should say, her VP choice, Tim Walz, play Madden against Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And did you see the X post that was put up by Tim Walz that was since deleted after Tim Walz played AOC in Madden? He put up a screenshot of their Madden game, which ended in a 0-0 tie. Very commie of them, by the way. And he wrote on X, AOC runs a mean pick six. Mark is shaking his head in disgust. You don't run a pick six. A pick six, which is an interception for a touchdown, just happens. You don't run the play pick six. I'm not sold. I mean, Tim Walz has lied about a lot of stuff in his past, Tiananmen Square and everything else. I'm not certain that this guy was ever a football coach if he's tweeting out that his opponent runs a mean pick six. Unbelievable.
Now, score again?
0-0.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here's the tweet. AOC can run a mean pick six, and I can call an audible on a play. There was no pick six. No one scored in the game, chump. I don't know if this guy was actually ever a football coach or if he allowed an intern to run his X account, which is entirely possible. But it goes to show you where the guys who actually like football are probably voting in this election cycle.
They must have turned the game off at halftime, too, because the game can't end in a tie.
Well,
it's football.
Yeah, I think they probably got bored. I mean, you think AOC wants to spend her Sunday playing Madden with Tim Walz? And they throw Tim Walz in a camo hat. They hand him a controller, and they're like, all right, go get him there, big boy. Yeah, macho man. So they're doing things like that. But the entire pitch to men from the Harris campaign has been like weed, crypto, porn, video games, and avoiding fatherhood. That's it. Just look at some of these headlines over the last couple of weeks. NPR, in outreach to black men, Harris to vow to legalize weed, protect crypto. It's like the vision of what men want or what men should want from young, woke women. That's what the pitch is all about. All right, we got to reach out to men. What do we do? Well, let's play video games and talk about legalizing weed and, porn. Yeah, that's right. That's what guys like, right? It's like, no. Guys want to be guys. Men want to have families. That's the headline from NPR back on October 14th. How about this? We've got this here. From Mayor Pete Buttigieg. Catholic News Agency. Abortion makes men more free, says Pete Buttigieg. A way to try to convince men to vote for Kamala Harris on the issue of abortion. More free. Do whatever you want. No repercussions. You just go ahead and you take care of it with an abortion after the fact. You don't have to be an adult. You can be an adolescent till you're 35 years old, which is a rampant problem in today's culture. And I guess the Kamala Harris campaign thinks that's attractive to guys. And then you had yesterday the ad we played for you, which was just, beyond gross. But it's an ad trying to get young men to vote for Kamala Harris and vote for Democrats on the issue of pornography. Now, I've not heard either side talk a lot about this, but when you're desperate and you're trying to reach young men, this is what you do. You run an ad like this, which is a young man who is sitting there on the couch doing something to himself, while then an old white guy Republican politician shows up in his room.
Oh! Sorry, you can't do that.
What the hell, man? How'd you get in here?
I'm your Republican congressman. Now that we're in charge, we're banning porn nationwide.
You can't tell me what to do. Get out of my bedroom, you creep.
I won the last election, so it's my decision. I'm just going to watch and make sure you don't finish illegally.
That is now an ad that a Democratic PAC is running to try to cater to young men. It's really insulting how they view us young men. Now, I happen to be, I guess, a guy they would be targeting in my mid-30s. They have no chance. But with 3 little kids, I think to myself, well, the guys that I grew up with, they're not all married. They don't all have kids. Many do. A couple still don't. But they want that, I know. They want that for themselves. They want to build a family. They want to build a life. They don't want to live in perpetual adolescence into their late 30s and early 40s. Most guys don't want that. They might not have found what they need to yet to develop and have a family, but they want it. And that ad yesterday, I had a lot of you reach out and email me about that ad that I just played. And one person sent me a note, and they said, Pete, I work with a lot of 20-something-year-old guys, and I played that ad for them, and they were totally offended. They were grossed out, number one. And secondarily, they said, we don't just sit around, fill in the blank, to porn all day. That's not what we do. That's not what we're interested in doing. And a lot of them have said that they also look at the situation and they're in their mid-20s. They want to move out of their parents' house and they want a better economy to afford that home so they can move out of their parents' basement. But they view things right now as unattainable. And we know what's happened to housing costs over the last couple of years. So instead of the Harris campaign figuring out a way to reach out to those guys, the young men who are out there who want to get out of mom and dad's basement, who want to maybe buy a first home, buy a condo, just get out, start doing their own thing. Because let's be honest, you're not going to find your wife living at home. You're not going to do it. You got to be out on your own. You got to be an adult. And then you can spread your wings. Instead of appealing to them based on that, it's like, well, I'm the candidate that's going to make sure you can sit around and watch all the porn you want all day and smoke all the weed you want all day and play all the video games that you want all day and avoid fatherhood on the outside chance you get lucky and something bad happens. Like, that's not a pitch. And then we sit there and we wonder why the campaign is not connecting with young men. Maybe because young men have been, as a whole, as a gender, disrespected for the last decade and a half at least. And I say that with 3 young daughters. The movement to empower women has been tremendous. But unfortunately, it's gotten to the point where it's come at the expense of men. And it doesn't need to be that way. Everybody can be uplifted. Everybody can be put in a situation where they should be allowed to pursue whatever their dreams are, and we should all want the same things in life. Not that everybody has to have kids or everybody has to get married. It's not for everybody. We understand that. But there's a lot of people who want that for themselves, and they just can't find it right now. And there are economic reasons for that. There are social reasons for that, societal reasons for that. And the sooner we get to the bottom of that, and the sooner we start addressing that, the better off we'll be. But in the meantime, you have bottom-of-the-barrel politics being played with 1 week to go until the election. And that does not, I don't think, move the needle one bit when it comes to young men shifting away from Donald Trump and towards Kamala Harris. But keep trying. I mean, keep trying the weed, porn, crypto, abortion thing and see how it works over the next week. The text line is 913-408-7957. That's our studio line and our text line on KCMO. Pete, let's not forget Obamacare allowed adult children to stay on their parents' health insurance until 26 years old. I've seen it at my own job at St. Luke's North Hospital. That is a larger conversation, but I'll just say this much. If you are in open enrollment, as many businesses are, please tell me if your insurance has gone down in the years of Obamacare. The more the government gets involved in anything, the more the cost seems to go up. Every single year, I have seen my health insurance go up for myself and my family. And it's amazing how when the government got involved, it just kept skyrocketing. It's funny how that works, isn't it? 913-408-7957. It's 645, and especially those young men. When you see the pitch like this, or if you're a parent of young adult men, you see the pitch like this. I keep hearing more anecdotally on it, but I do want to hear from you as we approach 7 o'clock on 95.7 FM, KCMO Talk Radio. I don't like to get all wonky with polls, so I won't do it because that gets very boring. I'm trying to get you up and get you excited for the day at 6:50 on a Tuesday. But I just will say this as we talk about the gender gap. CBS News had a new poll out yesterday, and here's an interesting tidbit from this poll. It's got men up double digits with Trump, or Trump up double digits with men. It's got Harris up double digits with women across the country. But here's the interesting little tidbit from this poll. On balance, CBS News writes, voters say women face more discrimination than men do today. And women are especially apt to say so. But men who think men face at least some discrimination, and half of them do, are voting for Donald Trump. Women who think women face discrimination are overwhelmingly for Kamala Harris. So basically, if you are a guy and you think there is discrimination against men in today's culture, you're voting for Trump. If you are a woman and you think women face discrimination, you're voting for Kamala Harris. Basically, if you think that you are a victim of some kind of one of the two genders, you have a very clear preferred choice. And that's not surprising to me, I will add. Now, right now, when I look at corporate America and the corporate workplace, like, I understand that women will feel that way in certain situations because there are guys who are just pigs and clowns and the whole deal and still act like it's 1952. Not that any of that stuff was ever appropriate, but, there's always some of that goes on with some people, and it's highly offensive, rude, and disrespectful.
Sorry.
Thank you, John. But then also on the other side, I will say this. When you look at the workplace, and if you've ever done any kind of a DEI training, who is most likely to be the quote-unquote bad guy? It's the old white guy. It's always how it goes. It is, trust me, if you've done a DEI training before in corporate America, you know that as well as I do. Never mind if you call yourself a conservative white guy. Then forget it. Then it's game, set, match, right? I can't tell you how many people I work with. We have 6 radio stations here, so we've got dozens of employees. I can't tell you how many people will come up to me and whisper to me things that either I've said that they've heard back on the podcast or things on the radio station or other shows that they like, and they whisper it. They do like their Biden whisper. Hey, man, Bongino was really good today. I'm like, we can talk about this like we're talking about a station that this company owns that's in this building that I host the show for and we run in the whole thing. Like, it's okay to talk outwardly about this, but they feel like they can't. They feel like they have to hide it, John. Don't start naming names on the air. I don't want to throw people under the bus, all right?
Hey, man, that Led Zeppelin on Fox sounded cool. Can you imagine?
Things that'll never happen, right?
Yeah, right.
It's just there's no way. So there is an element of that right now where the rogue, the alternative lifestyle has suddenly become the conservative, traditional way of life. Those are the people who right now feel like they've just got to keep their thoughts, their opinions, their view on the world to themselves. They will vote a certain way, but they're not going to be bragging about it. I mean, go through your neighborhood. I live in a suburban neighborhood in Johnson County. And I bet you my neighborhood, I'm pretty confident my neighborhood is probably 50-50, maybe 55-45 Republican and Democrat if I'm just spitballing here. But the Democrat signs to the Republican signs are easily 2-1, maybe 3-1. Same thing. If you're a Republican, are you really going to put that sign up in your yard? A lot of people aren't going to do it. They're just not going to be bothered. They don't want to deal with the headaches that could come from this. And that says a lot about where we are as a society and as a country today. 913-408-7957. Jonathan is in Kansas City on KCMO. What's up, man?
Hey, Pete. I guess I appreciate the Democrats finally talking about, there's a male problem. Obviously, they're really late to the party. I guess I can speak from my experience as a guy and then the experience of, my guy friends, when we're talking about what we're going through in life. I'm a divorcee. My ex-wife cheated on me and walked out after a few years of marriage, which, had a significant impact on my life. Obviously it was a lot of negative with it. I learned some important lessons along the way, which I guess is a positive way, that can help you become a better person. But, as I look back on my experience, and, I have a friend who recently went through a similar experience with a divorce. And when I'm talking to him, we think a lot the same thing. It's like, okay, we try to do the right thing. We want to start families. We want to do all these things. But then when you look at the culture, the larger culture, it's like there's not really a lot of encouragement for men or for women, but certainly not for men. Like, hey, stick around, be loyal, make things work. When times get tough, build a community and, to work through it. I just don't see that anymore. And, I was old enough to grow up in the 90s and 2000s. I think, people have always been imperfect, but I think back then people would come together and they'd be like, all right, let's see if we can find a way to work this out. I just don't think there's that attitude anymore. And I think that's infiltrated into our politics where, you have an entire major political party now that says, you know what, just give up on all that crap. Just live your truth. Live the life you want to live. And I just look at that and I'm like, I'm sorry, but it's not working for anybody. As Dr. Phil says, how's that working out for you? It's not working for anybody. And, Democrats are now finally admitting, well, maybe this is not working. But it's like, okay, but what are you actually going to do about it? And it's like, well, crickets,
And where have you been for so long? And I agree with that sentiment, Jonathan, as someone who also grew up. How old are you, by the way? Oh, he went away. Well, he said he grew up in the 90s and 2000s, which is obviously when I grew up. And I think there's something to be said for that. Now, I do think we get nostalgic about the past always being better than the present and simpler than the present in some ways. And I get it. I feel that way as well sometimes too. But there's no doubt that the thing that is at an all-time high right now is loneliness. The amount of time that people spend alone is at a record high. And that's in part because marriage is down, having children is down, social media, obviously, our ability to work from home and not have to go to an actual building anymore. All those things have led us to this point where loneliness is, frankly, one of the biggest problems that we're facing as a country and a culture that gets under-discussed. And that allows people to create a scenario where they are victims in their own minds. And that's unfortunate because, frankly, we sit here as a culture right now, and we need to fix that. Because all we're doing is creating more divide as the years go on. Oh, I just got to put a bow on this conversation real fast. Then I'm going to get to Mayor Quentin Lucas here and some of the controversy surrounding him over the last couple of days. We've got women flooding the text line saying that they are the ones who actually give their husbands voting guides. So that's interesting. And then this anecdotal story came in as well, as we were just talking about which spouse is more likely to try to pressure the other spouse into voting a certain way. And this comes in, Pete, every dude in my Southland, KC neighborhood is hiding from their snowflake woke wives that they're voting for Trump. Oh, gosh. I feel bad for you, honestly, if that's you.
Right.
I really do. If you can't tell your wife how you're voting because you're afraid of the wrath coming your way, it's a tough way to live, man. Tough way to live. But not the first time people have been living secret lives in this country. Just now it's based on politics. Very, very sad.
Feigning ignorance can be a solid strategy sometimes.
That's true as well. That's a great
point. You don't have to tell everybody everything you know.
Oh, gosh. Okay. Quentin Lucas was in Nevada over the weekend. It's not Nevada. It is Nevada. And he's in Nevada to catch a Chiefs game. And also, he happens to be there where Tim Walz, Tiananmen Tim, is hanging out for the weekend in a swing state, which the early voting there, based on return ballots, is looking very good for Donald Trump.
Big
I will
Madden
add.
tournament up there?
No big Madden tournament that I'm aware of. I didn't know if Q was trying to play Tim Walz, Chiefs versus Vikings.
He had the winner of the AFC.
Yeah. AOC Tiananmen Tim winner was playing Quentin Lucas. Unfortunately, that game ended in a 0-0 tie.
Dang it.
So he's there on behalf of the Harris campaign, and Tim Walz gave a shout-out to Mayor Q.
Speaking of coaching, I don't know if you know this, we have a special guest here today. Mayor Quentin Lucas is the mayor of Kansas City. He's here with us. So, hey, he's a good man. He's a good man. So you can root for the Raiders and still like this guy a lot. So go with that.
Okay. Kind of weird, kind of awkward, but that's what Tim Walz does. He's strange and awkward. But I'll leave that aside for now. I saw a lot of people on the right and the left over the weekend being outraged by Quentin Lucas being in Vegas and saying, hey, he's the mayor of Kansas City. We've got problems here. He's got to stay here. And it wasn't just his usual critics. It was also people to his left, like former wannabe politician in Kansas City, Justice Horny. He was one of the guys out there complaining about Mayor Lucas going to Nevada. Let me just say this. I don't care. Now, here's the thing. If we had a Republican governor or a Republican mayor, in Kansas City, and that mayor was helping out Donald Trump down the home stretch, would I be like, hey, you get back here, man or woman, you got work to do back here? It's the weekend. And frankly, most of the time, the less the government does, the better off we are. As long as we're not paying for it, and we've asked him about this on the show, and it is not paid for by us, then I don't really care what he does over the weekend. Like, there are enough things to be bothered by, to be upset with in this town and in this country, that Quentin Lucas spending a few minutes advocating for Tiananmen Tim is not going to be high on my list of things that I'm hot and bothered by. Now, I think it's career suicide for him, but I do understand he's at a point here right now in his political career that his best bet to take that next step politically is to have Kamala Harris win and get some kind of Washington, D.C. appointment. It's not a secret that that is something that he has advocated for during his time in office, especially now that he's in his last term as mayor. There's no other pathway for him. Okay, he's not going to win a statewide election. No Democrat is in this climate right now in Missouri. There's only one congressional seat that might make sense, and that's Emanuel Cleaver. But Emanuel Cleaver does not appear to be going anywhere. And a little inside baseball, there is no love lost, and this is me putting it politely and politically. There is no love lost between Emanuel Cleaver and Quentin Lucas. I will just leave it at that. So he's doing what he thinks makes sense for his political future. I think it's a massive mistake for him to try to hitch onto this bandwagon and this apparently sinking ship of Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. He's better off, I think, staying away from the fray, being more independent, and seeing where the political winds go from here. But whatever, he's making that choice. But I don't sit here today being like, oh man, he's got to get back here. I mean, the guy does do more events in and around Kansas City than any local politician in the entire region. I don't know when he spends time with his family.
I know. The guy's like 6 to 10 P at least.
It's
6,
like,
8, 10 P.
Dude, it's okay. You don't have to go to, just trying to think of a made-up group here.
Northwest Southeast All-Star.
Yeah. The left-handed Latino LGBTQ plus, third string
Potluck
rally.
dinner.
I don't even know. I mean, the guy is everywhere and anywhere. Sometimes I wonder if he's cloned himself to go to all the different parades and events that he goes to. So he does plenty of stuff. It's not like he hides from Kansas City. So of all the things that Quentin Lucas has done or could do, going to Nevada to spend a few minutes with Tim Walz, and then I imagine, I don't know, I didn't follow his social media that closely, watch the Chiefs play the Raiders on Sunday, whatever. Like, there are only so many things to get worked up over in this town. That is not going to be high on my list, and I don't believe it should be all that high on your list right now.
Nope, you're right. The less the government does, the better, unless it's Jackson County, and the less they do, the more likely it is they're supposed to be doing something. Right?
Yes. Like, if Frank White was doing that, I'd actually be more bothered because no one knows where the guy is half the time. He's coaching first base in Kansas for the Monarchs throughout the entire summer, and then he's going on the road to Sioux Falls for a big 3-game weekend set. Like, that would be more bothersome to me than Quentin Lucas going to Nevada for a couple of days, or not even to hang out with Tim Walz. But I'll tell you what, if you did not hear the conversation last week with Quentin Lucas when he was on the show on a Thursday, it was pretty eye-opening to me because he was fresh off a trip to Wisconsin. And he did not sound like a guy that felt very confident in his candidate. He praised Donald Trump's ability to talk like a real person. And he talked anecdotally about getting chewed out by older black women who are like the border's a mess and you guys are screwing us over up here. He didn't have to give that story, but he gave that anecdotal story on this show last week. And I don't think that was by accident. It was almost a signal to me, while he didn't say this outright, just reading between the lines, it was a signal to me that he didn't feel great about where this thing was heading for his preferred candidate. When he mentions getting chewed out by older black ladies in Wisconsin who are complaining, rightfully so, about the border policies of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. That is very telling to me. And in Nevada, where the Latino vote oftentimes drives the final results, and the Latino vote swinging heavily and the working class vote swinging heavily towards Donald Trump in this election cycle, that is suddenly a state that very much appears to be in play, and we will see how it plays out 1 week from today. Tirade Tuesday is coming up at the bottom of the hour on KCMO Talk Radio. That is 20 minutes away. Get those tirades all lined up. The segment's only as good as you make it. 913-408-7957. Tirade Tuesdays in 20 minutes on KCMO Talk Radio. And we've got some sanctimonious nonsense from our favorite or least favorite local media outlet. And it's in regards to Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift and bad jokes. That's next on KCMO. Please, Jeff Bezos, please buy the Kansas City Star for all of our sakes. Just do us a favor. Help us out here in the heartland, my brother. Jeff Bezos writing a great piece yesterday in the Washington Post that he owns, where he came out and said, no one trusts journalists anymore. We've got to do a better job of doing less opinion and more news and be believable, and we've got to turn the corner. Kansas City Star's not getting that memo.
Be the fact checkers that you all want.
Yes.
Right?
Exactly.
Be that fact checker.
So you got this piece in the Kansas City Star this morning. Derek Donovan, opinion editor over there at the Star, and he was very offended by one of the jokes that Tony Hinchcliffe made during the Donald Trump Madison Square Garden rally on Sunday night, and it was the one about Travis Kelce.
Good. I have other policies that I think it should be implemented as well. Like me personally, I think football should be all year round. Yeah. So many great athletes. I don't know about you guys, but I think that Travis Kelce might be the next O.J. Simpson. Feels good in here.
Now, if I was in that audience, I didn't find that hysterically funny, and I feel like I have a decent sense of humor. We like to have a few laughs here on KCMO once in a while. But I'm just like, okay, now, listen, he's an insult comic. I guess it's a little outrageous, but I don't quite understand it. In fact, I could see Travis Kelce dumping her just as easily as I could see her dumping him, and then him pulling an O.J. Simpson or something like that.
The only thing I can think of is him getting into acting like O.J. did. You know?
Yeah.
That's the only thing. I don't think he's going to go violent on anybody. But
listen, I'm not in the business of predicting that stuff, okay? I'll predict politics poorly once in a while. I will not get predicting who's the next O.J. Simpson around here. I promise you that.
I was going to say his target was clear.
Yeah. It's just, come on. So just whatever. It's a joke. Didn't really hit. Kind of lame. Whatever. Move on. The Star donates about 800 words of a column here to it, headlined, Trump rally comic didn't just spew racism. He called Travis Kelce the next O.J. Simpson. Okay, here we go. Sunday at Trump's rally at MSG, the opening act crossed yet another line in mainstream political discourse. He suggested Travis Kelce might murder his famous girlfriend. Hinchcliffe is getting lots of attention for other disgusting bits in his short set, such as calling Puerto Rico a floating island of garbage, or calling Jewish people cheap, or a gag about African Americans and watermelon. It's freely available all over social media, though I'm not quoting any more of it here. Oh, I'm not quoting. I won't quote any more of it here. Oh.
5 references was enough.
This is how the Trump campaign chose to kick off its event. Likely its last big hurrah before Election Day. Tony Hinchcliffe isn't exactly a household name, but he's hugely influential amongst his target audience, young men. He's the co-host of the popular Kill Tony podcast, which features A-list stand-up comics. But while Kill Tony is ostensibly about comedy, the host's politics are not hard to figure out. Looking at recent guest lists, you'll notice far-right figures get invited to talk to its listeners. The world of podcasts has changed dramatically over time as the worldwide media ecosystem continues to sort itself into niches where audiences can choose entertainment that reflects their own point of view. Several of the biggest shows are targeted at young men. One of the most popular among them is the Joe Rogan Experience. 2 of Rogan's pet topics are conspiracy theories and masculinity. He is a mixed martial arts enthusiast, and he famously weighs in on subjects he doesn't fully understand. Oh, my gosh.
Oh, boy.
So somehow we've gone from Taylor Swift to the comedian to Joe Rogan is a conspiracy theorist It's just a poorly written article. It's really just horribly written, and it's supposed to just check off a bunch of left-wing talking points. But it ends here in the Kansas City Star by saying this. Crude, even obscene humor is a major part of its appeal to young men who are understandably resentful about what we used to call political correctness. In that world, calling Puerto Rico garbage or saying the VP is SH, as Trump did a few days ago, isn't shocking at all. For the rest of us, though, suggesting that a sweet romance between two beloved public figures is going to end up in a bloodbath is still alarming to most Americans, I'm betting, especially as the introduction to the closing argument by a Republican candidate for the President of the United States. Because I don't believe most of us have any interest in living in a country where this vile, violent hatred is just a joke. Well, I'm glad that Derek Donovan of the Kansas City Star is more offended and more upset by a joke about Travis Kelce being O.J. Simpson than he appears to be about Donald Trump nearly being assassinated twice in the last 4 months. I didn't see any condemnation, 1,000-word pieces, looking at his own side of the political aisle and their rhetoric about Donald Trump and their rhetoric about Republicans at large, the last week calling them Nazis and fascists nonstop, when it comes to vile, violent hatred. I wonder why that might be. So as the pearl clutching continues in the wake of Sunday, I want to play for you somebody that Derek Donovan might admire, and that would be left-wing comedian Jon Stewart, who also told his own audience last night to chill the bleep out.
Raise the alarms.
The opening act, grabbing headlines for all the wrong reasons, a comedian who offered unfunny, racist, cringeworthy jokes.
Basically calling Puerto Ricans trash.
The most repulsive racial jokes about Latinos.
Disgusting and hateful.
So incredibly crude.
Frankly, just too X-rated to play here.
Extremely vile so-called jokes.
Extremely vile so-called jokes. She name-checked my comedy album from the 90s. Did I really? I don't know who's AI, me or that guy. Now, obviously, in retrospect, having a roast comedian come to a political rally a week before Election Day and roasting a key voting demographic, probably not the best decision by the campaign politically. But to be fair, the guy's really just doing what he does. I mean, here he is at the Tom Brady roast a few months ago.
The great Jeff Ross, ladies and gentlemen. Jeff is so Jewish, he only watches football for the coin toss. Gronk, you look like the Nazi that kept burning himself on the ovens. Kevin is so small that when his ancestors picked cotton, they called it deadlifting.
Yes, of course. Terrible, boo, yes. There's something wrong with me. I find that guy very funny. So, I'm sorry. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, bringing him to a rally and have him not do roast jokes, that'd be like bringing Beyonce to a rally and not have...
Oh, man, that was Jon Stewart last night. Of course, a reference to Beyonce showing up at the Kamala rally in Houston. Everyone thinks she's going to perform, and she speaks for 2 minutes about abortion and goes home. Jon Stewart is telling his own side to chill out. Is it the best campaign strategy? It's not, right? But two things can be true at once here. Not the best campaign strategy, but stop trying to kill comedy. You've already done it for the most part, but my goodness, not having a sense of humor is just not worth it. Relax. Although I guess their humor is Kathy Griffin holding up a bloodied head of Donald Trump.